His lawyer leaned in and whispered 5 words. Just 5. And Daniel's face, that smug, self-satisfied face I'd stared at across the breakfast table for 15 years, went completely white. His hands started trembling. The papers he'd been so eager to sign were shaking like leaves in a storm. And me, for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how we got here, how a woman everyone thought had lost her mind actually played the longest, most patient game of her life. My name is Evelyn Cross. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was married to Daniel Hart. 15 years of marriage. That's longer than most Hollywood relationships, longer than some small countries have existed, and definitely longer than my patience should have lasted. But I'm a stubborn woman. I get it from my grandmother. I met Daniel when I was 17. I had graduated high school early, not because I was some genius, but because I was practical and motivated and really, really wanted to get out of my parents' house. I got a job at Henderson and Price law firm as a file clerk, minimum wage, maximum paper cuts, but it was mine. By 18, I'd worked my way up to legal assistant. I was good with details, good with numbers, good with keeping my mouth shut and my eyes open. Daniel was 24 when we met at a client event. Charming, ambitious, full of dreams about building a real estate empire. He talked about the future like it was already his, like success was just waiting for him to show up and claim it. He said he was going to build something incredible. I said I'd help him file the paperwork. Romance, right? We got married when I was 19. Noah came along when I was 20. I kept working at the law firm part-time while raising our son, building up my 401k, saving every spare dollar. My grandmother always said a woman should have her own money. Not secret money, she'd clarify, just her own, something nobody could take. At 23, Daniel's business finally took off. He asked me to quit the law firm and help him full-time. He needed someone to manage the books, handle clients, coordinate with contractors, someone he could trust completely. So I became his unpaid everything: bookkeeper, office manager, client liaison, interior decorator for model homes, marketing coordinator, event planner. I did it all while raising Noah, managing our household, and somehow keeping everyone fed and reasonably happy. My official title was wife. My unofficial title was everything else. For 11 years, I poured myself into building Daniel's dream, and for 11 years, he got the credit, the awards, the recognition. At every industry event, I was Daniel's wife. At every celebration, he thanked his team, his mentors, his vision, but somehow never quite got around to thanking me. Somewhere along the way, things shifted. He started making decisions without consulting me, started staying late for work more and more often, started criticizing little things, the way I dressed, the meals I cooked, my lack of ambition. I was running his entire back office for free while raising his son and keeping his life organized, but sure, not ambitious enough. Then 3 months ago, he dropped the bomb. He came home on a Tuesday evening. I was making dinner. His favorite, actually, because I'm apparently a glutton for unappreciated effort. He sat me down at the kitchen table with this look on his face. Not sad, not apologetic, just businesslike. "I want a divorce," he said, and then, "I want the house, the cars, the business, everything. You can keep Noah." He said it like he was ordering from a menu. "I'll have the assets, hold the child, thanks." Keep Noah like our 15-year-old son was a leftover pizza, like he was an inconvenience being graciously allowed to stay with me. I just stared at him. 15 years of marriage, and this was how it ended? At our kitchen table, between the salt shaker and the butter dish? Like I was just another item he was discarding. What I didn't know in that moment, what I wouldn't find out until later, was that Daniel had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer, Richard Collins, expensive and experienced. He'd been building his exit strategy while I was meal prepping and scheduling his dentist appointments. I'd been blindsided by a man I'd trusted with everything. The next day, his mother showed up. Margaret Hart, a woman who had treated me like the help for 15 years, arrived with her perfectly styled hair and her perfectly practiced sympathy face. She patted my hand and told me I should try harder to keep him happy. "Men have needs, dear," she said, like she was explaining something complicated to a slow child. Margaret's advice on marriage was always fascinating, considering her husband spent 7 days a week on the golf course specifically to avoid being in the same room as her. But sure, I was the problem. That first week was a blur. Daniel moved me to the guest room. He had documents drawn up, settlements proposed, timelines established. Everything was moving so fast, and I felt like I was drowning. Everyone saw a woman whose world had just collapsed, a wife being thrown away after 15 years of service, a victim who didn't see it coming. But here's the thing. What Daniel didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd found something 3 years ago, something buried in his own financial records, something he thought was hidden forever, and I'd been quietly, patiently preparing ever since. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment. Thank you. Back to the disaster. Within a week of the announcement, Daniel completely took control. The guest room became my permanent residence in what used to be my home. My closet shrank from a walk-in to 2 small sections he graciously allowed me to keep. The message was clear. This isn't your house anymore. Within 2 weeks, he started bringing her around. Madison Lane, 27 years old, worked at his company. Of course she did. She had that Instagram-perfect look, blonde highlights, perfect nails, yoga pants that cost more than my weekly groceries. She walked into my kitchen like she owned it, wore my apron, my grandmother's apron, while making smoothies in my blender. She was younger than my marriage, younger than my favorite handbag, but she made amazing smoothies, so I guess that's something. Daniel paraded her around like a trophy. They'd sit on my couch, watch my TV, eat off my plates. He'd put his arm around her right in front of me, like I was furniture, like I'd already disappeared. The humiliation escalated daily. First, he canceled my personal credit card. "We need to separate finances," he said, like he was being reasonable. Then the joint card. Then he suggested I should probably find somewhere else to stay while we sorted things out. My own home, and I was being asked to leave? Margaret came over to help me pack, and by help, I mean she went through my belongings and decided what I deserved to keep. Old clothes? Fine. Family photos? Some of them. My grandmother's recipe box. She hesitated on that one like she was considering claiming it for herself. What I was not allowed to take, any jewelry Daniel had bought me over 15 years, any furniture I'd picked out, anything of value. Those were marital assets, Margaret explained, and Daniel was entitled to them. She packed my things in garbage bags, not boxes, garbage bags, like I was trash being taken out. Through all of this, I had one person I thought I could trust, Rachel Moore. We'd been friends since high school, 20 years of friendship through boyfriends and breakups and babies and everything in between. She was the first person I called after Daniel's announcement. She was so supportive, always checking in, always asking how I was holding up, always ready to listen. She'd come over with wine and let me cry on her shoulder. She told me I deserved better. She told me Daniel was making a huge mistake. But something felt off. Little things. At first, Daniel seemed to know my plans before I made them. When I mentioned to Rachel that I was thinking about fighting for the house, Noah came home the next day saying Dad told him it wouldn't work. When I told Rachel I was looking at apartments in a specific area, Daniel made a comment about that exact area being too expensive for me. Then it clicked. Looking back, I should have seen it years ago. The way Rachel always lit up when Daniel walked into the room, the way she'd compliment him just a little too much, laugh at his jokes just a little too hard. She always asked about him first whenever we talked. How's Daniel? How's the business? Is Daniel happy? She'd been carrying a torch for my husband for 15 years, and Daniel, because he collected admirers, some people collect stamps, knew exactly how to use her. He made her feel special, important, not like other women. He probably implied they'd get together after the divorce, gave her just enough hope to keep her loyal. My best friend was his spy. 20 years of friendship sold out for some flirting and empty promises. At least charge more, Rachel. But the worst part wasn't Daniel, wasn't Margaret, wasn't even Rachel. The worst part was Noah. My son saw everything. The girlfriend, the grandmother packing my bags, the way his father looked at me like I was nothing. And Daniel was working on him, dripping poison in his ear day after day. Your mom is making this difficult. I just want everyone to be happy. She's the one dragging this out. I'm trying to be fair, but she won't cooperate. Noah started pulling away from me, not angry exactly, just distant, confused. He didn't know who to believe, and his father was very, very convincing. I could lose the house, I could lose the money, I could lose everything I'd spent 15 years building, but watching my son look at me like I was the problem, that was the knife. That was the wound that actually bled. I hired a lawyer, Laura Bennett, recommended by my old firm. 52 years old, sharp as a razor, absolutely no tolerance for nonsense. She reviewed my situation and laid out the battle plan. You helped build this business, she said. You're entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, the accounts. We fight. I looked at her for I kept my voice soft, slightly unsteady. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. And you're entering this agreement voluntarily. No one is pressuring you. No, Your Honor. I looked down at my hands, then back up at her. I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. I want this to be over. The judge studied me for another long moment. I could practically see her internal debate, whether to push harder, whether to order a continuance, whether to protect me from what looked like a terrible decision. But I was represented by counsel. I was answering clearly. I was an adult woman making my own choice. Very well, she said finally. Let's proceed. The clerk distributed the final documents, page after page of legal language, signatures required on every third page. Daniel signed eagerly, barely glancing at what he was agreeing to. He wanted this done. He wanted to get back to his new life with his new girlfriend and his new freedom. I signed slowly, deliberately. Every stroke of my pen was careful and precise. This was the moment I'd been waiting 3 years for. I was going to savor it. Across the courtroom, I saw Daniel glance at Margaret and smile. She nodded back approvingly. In the hallway, his phone buzzed, probably Madison sending encouragement. He checked his phone in court during his own divorce hearing. That's the kind of man he was. Meanwhile, Richard Collins was doing what good lawyers do, reviewing the complete document package one final time. Main agreements signed, asset schedule signed, settlement terms signed. Then he reached the addendum, liability disclosure statement. I watched his face as he read, watched the confusion flicker across his features, watched him flip back a page, then forward again, like he was hoping he'd misread something. He hadn't. Richard's face went pale. He leaned toward Daniel, trying to be discreet. "Sir," he whispered, "we need to talk." Daniel waved him off, still basking in his victory. "Not now. We're almost done." Richard's voice was more urgent. "You're assuming all debt." Daniel turned to look at him. "What, the liability disclosure?" Richard whispered, papers rustling as he pointed. "The mortgages, the business liens, it's all here. You're assuming personal liability for everything." For the first time, Daniel actually looked at what he'd signed. I watched his eyes scan the numbers, watched the color drain from his face. House, $1.1 million owed. Market value, $850,000. Business, $480,000 in combined debts. Vehicles, $115,000 in lease obligations. Additional personal liabilities, $200,000. Total debt, approximately $1.9 million. Net value of everything he just claimed, negative $300,000. He hadn't won the lottery. He'd won the bill for it. Daniel stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This isn't right." He looked at me, then at the judge, then back at the papers. "She hid this from me. This is fraud." Judge Brooks' voice was sharp. "Mr. Hart, sit down." "These numbers are fake," Daniel insisted, his voice rising. "She manipulated the documents." Mr. Hart, the judge's tone left no room for argument. Sit down. He sat, but his hands were shaking. His confident smile was gone, replaced by something that looked a lot like panic. Judge Brooks looked at the documents in front of her, then at Daniel. Mr. Hart, I'm looking at the liability disclosure statement attached to this agreement. These are debts associated with assets you are claiming. Assets in your name, your business, your property. She fixed him with a hard stare. Are you telling this court that you don't know your own financial situation? Silence. Watching Daniel try to explain why he didn't know about his own debts was like watching a cat explain why there's a broken vase on the floor. Fascinating and completely unconvincing. Richard cleared his throat. Your Honor, I should note that I advised my client to conduct an independent financial review prior to this hearing. He declined. I have documentation. He produced the waiver, the one Daniel had signed without reading, the one that said in clear legal language that Richard had recommended a full audit and Daniel had refused. Judge Brooks reviewed it briefly. So, Mr. Hart was advised to verify these figures. He chose not to. He signed a waiver acknowledging that choice. She looked at Daniel. Is that your signature, Mr. Hart? A long pause. Yes. Then you assumed this risk voluntarily. Judge Brooks' voice was matter-of-fact. You had the opportunity to investigate. You chose not to. The agreement stands. Daniel turned to me, desperation breaking through his composure. You knew. His voice cracked. You knew about all of this? I met his eyes calmly. I was your bookkeeper for 11 years, Daniel. I knew about everything. His face cycled through emotions faster than I could count. Confusion, rage, betrayal, fear, and finally the one I'd been waiting for. Realization. The understanding that he'd done this himself. I want to withdraw the agreement, Daniel said, turning back to the judge. I didn't understand what I was signing. This isn't fair. Judge Brooks shook her head. Mr. Hart, you signed documents before this court stating you understood and agreed to all terms. You were represented by competent counsel. You declined additional review. Your wife did not hide anything. These are your debts, your mortgages, your obligations. She paused. The agreement is final. The gavel came down. Mrs. Cross, you have your settlement. Mr. Hart, you have the assets as agreed, along with all associated liabilities. This marriage is dissolved. I stood, smoothed my dress, picked up my purse. Then I looked at Daniel one last time. He was slumped in his chair, papers scattered in front of him, his whole world collapsing around him. You said you wanted everything except Noah. I gave you exactly what you asked for. I walked out of that courtroom without looking back. In the hallway, I could hear Daniel's voice rising, yelling at Richard, demanding to know how this happened, threatening lawsuits. Richard's calm responses. I told you to get an audit. I have it in writing. You refused. Through the glass doors, I saw Madison's face change as she listened, saw look at Daniel, really look at him, and see something other than the successful businessman she'd thought she was getting. She was gone before I reached the elevator, moving fast, heels clicking on the marble floor, not looking back. Madison's exit was faster than her entrance into my marriage. At least she was consistent. I stepped outside into the April sunshine. The sky was blue. The air was warm. Somewhere behind me, my ex-husband was screaming at his lawyer about fairness and fraud and how none of this was his fault. Ahead of me was a new life, smaller than before, simpler, but completely and entirely mine. The collapse happened faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, Madison had moved out of the house, packed her things in the middle of the night, left a note that said, "This isn't what I signed up for." The gray kitchen sat empty. Within a month, Daniel tried to sell the house, but when you owe more than something is worth, there are no buyers, just banks calling about missed payments and realtors suggesting short sales. Within 2 months, the business started defaulting. Vendors filed lawsuits. The line of credit was frozen. The company that Daniel had spent 15 years building, the company I had spent 11 years supporting, was crumbling into dust. Within 3 months, Daniel was meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. years. The man who'd once bragged about his empire was now calculating which assets he could protect from creditors. The answer was almost nothing. Margaret's perfect son was calling family members asking for loans, showing up at relatives' houses with excuses and explanations. Nobody knew about the debt. Evelyn must have hidden it somehow. I was tricked. But the documents told a different story. The mortgages were in his name. The loans were in his name. The gambling debts, the crypto losses, the secret apartment, all his choices, all his signatures. I heard that Margaret's Christmas newsletter that year was very short. Daniel is exploring new opportunities. Yes, opportunities in debt restructuring. The parallel conflicts resolved themselves with a kind of poetic symmetry. Rachel called me a week after the hearing. Her voice was shaking. I had no idea things were this bad. I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I never meant for... I thought Daniel and I didn't answer, didn't respond, didn't give her the closure she was looking for. Some bridges aren't meant to be repaired. Some friendships don't deserve a second chance. 20 years of history betrayed for a wink and empty promises from a man who used everyone around him. She tried calling 3 more times, then she stopped. I imagine she's still waiting for Daniel to notice her. She'll be waiting a long time. Margaret tried a different approach, going through Noah. Tell your mother I didn't know about the money problems. Tell her I'm sorry for how I treated her. Tell her I want to talk. Noah looked at his grandmother, the woman who'd packed my mother's belongings in garbage bags, who'd called my mother worthless, who'd sided with her father without a single question, and said, "Mom's busy building her life. She doesn't have time for excuses." Margaret wanted forgiveness. I wanted peace. Guess who one of us got what we wanted? Noah, my wonderful, smart, observant son. He finally understood everything. Not because I explained it, but because he figured it out himself. He saw the court documents, he heard his father's excuses, he watched Madison leave, watched Margaret scramble, watched the whole facade collapse. One evening, about a month after the divorce was finalized, he sat with me in my small apartment. The